Does Israel's right to defend themselves also include giving weapons to the people who unalive?
Excuse me, sir? I myself am currently in El Salvador and can safely say that when you start seeing Stars of David everywhere and even windshields of pharmacy vans emblazoned with slogans such as Almighty One of Israel, in a country with an estimated Jewish population of 150 individuals, you know you're in a place with a serious Israel problem. It's particularly ironic given the sizable Palestinian community in El Salvador, mostly immigrants from Bethlehem who began arriving in the late 19th century. Now, there are more Palestinians in El Salvador than in Bethlehem itself, including the country's new president, Nayib Bukele, a distinctly nauseating character who thinks U.S. President Donald Trump is very nice and cool. Despite Trump's classification of El Salvador being a shithole country. In February 2018, Bukele, then mayor of San Salvador, traveled to Israel on an Israeli government-sponsored trip to attend a conference on security and other matters. There, he was able to partake in charming photo ops with then mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, and of the ultra-right Likud party, and to otherwise pull at social media heartstrings. But the Salvadorian-Israeli love affair goes back decades. While El Salvador has not attained the same extreme bootlicker status as the other diminutive nations such as Palau, in terms of votes at the United Nations in support of Israel's barbarity, it does often conveniently abstain them from voting. As it so happens, it abstained them in the 1947 UN vote on partition, and yet was the first of abstaining countries to recognize Israel. Israel also has a soft spot for El Salvador, owing to Jose Arturo Castellanos, a Salvadorian diplomat in Europe who saved thousands of Jews during World War II by providing them with certificates of Salvadorian citizenship. This, incidentally, was during the dictatorship of Salvadorian General Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez, who had recently taken it up upon himself to slaughter tens of thousands of mainly indigenous peasants in El Salvador, themselves historical victims of land theft and brutal oppression by the country's ruling elite. In other words, stuff that would soon sound all too familiar to Palestinians. According to Haaretz, the story of the Great Castellanos rescue only came to light in 1974 when El Salvador hosted a beauty pageant, and one of the judges, writer Leon Uriz, requested to meet with the ex-diplomat. Actually, the year was 1975, and the beauty pageant was the Miss Universo competition, which ended up setting yet another stage for bloodshed. As former New York Times correspondent Raymond Bonner notes in his book, Weakness and Deceit, America and El Salvador's Dirty War demonstrates against the government's decision to squander at least $1 million on the pageant. In a country of obscene poverty and inequality, were fiercely repressed. Then, when 3,000 students marched through the streets of the capital to protest the repression, soldiers fired on them with machine guns and automatic rifles, killing at least 12. A recent Al Jazeera video reminds us that from 1975 to 1979, the run-up to the 12-year Salvadorian Civil War, 83% of El Salvador's military imports came from Israel. Furthermore, Israelis helped train Ansesal, the secret police that would lay the foundation for death squads during the war, which at least 75,000 people perished. The vast majority of lethal violence was committed by the state and allied paramilitary groups and death squads. In its report titled Israel's Worldwide Role in Repression, The International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network documents how Israel not only provided weapons and counterinsurgency training to the maniacal Salvadorian right wing, but also helped plan and implement scorched earth policies. Israel's National Labor Federation, meanwhile, collaborated with the CIA and AFL-CIO to determine rural cooperatives. Of course, much of the right-wing terror in wartime El Salvador was made possible by Israel's BFF, the United States.